Hello, everyone. Welcome to Exploring 10 Frames with Mrs. Tudor and Mrs. McKinley. We are going to explore the 10 frame model for your TK through third grade classroom. 10 frames are a fantastic math model to support students in beginning to establish their number sense. All right, let's get started.
So 10 frames are used by teachers to help their students visualize the numbers. They are great tools when you're introducing numbers, like in the early ages and early grades, TK, kinder, first grade. You can show the students the number 4 and then also give them another visual using the number 4 while using it in a 10 frame. They are also a great tool when teaching students the concept of even and odd numbers. So as you move up in the grades, you can show them that once their 10 frame board is filled up, if there is one left over, that means that number's odd. Just different situations like that. It is a common teaching tool for early grade elementary students and can also be used in the later grades just to even find simple multiplication equations, and it's often used to teach simple addition and subtraction models, including the numbers of 0 to 10.
All right, here in the concrete phase, this is where you're going to have students use the manipulatives. So you would have a 10 frame out like this, and then you can ask them to do certain tasks, like represent a given number. So if you gave them the number 6, you would ask them to move 6 manipulatives into the 10 frame so they can see how that is represented. So right here we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So this is representing the number 6, and students can begin to associate that each of the squares in the 10 frame represent one single unit. As you get into the older grades, you can also start to begin to add additional manipulatives. So if this was 6 and I asked students to add 3 more manipulatives, they can then count out those manipulatives or begin to see that it is 1 less than a 10 frame. So this would represent the number 9.
So when we move into semi-concrete strategies, it's the transition between a concrete, like a physical object that they are able to use as markers to put in these 10 frames. Instead of having these physical objects, they are now able to draw out their manipulatives. So instead of having 3 markers for their 10 frame, they would simply draw out 3 shapes in 3 of the squares, or in each one of the squares, and then draw another 4 of a different kind of shape, or just 4 more circles in the square to show their equation rather than using physical markers for it.
In the semi-concrete, if you're working with littles like TK or kindergarten and they're learning to recognize their numbers and connect that those numbers represent a single object, you can do something like this in the semi-concrete phase where you're giving them a number like the number 3 in our example here, and then you would have them draw 3 shapes inside of the 10 frame to show that each shape represents a square in the 10 frame, and then that then relates back to the number that they're trying to represent. In this case, it would be the number 3.
So now we are moving into the final stage of this technique, into the abstract phase, where students will not need to use physical or even visual manipulatives to identify numbers. They should be able to look at the dots represented in the 10 frame and know exactly what number they represent. In this worksheet example, they do have the dots in their 10 frames to represent that number, but it is asking them to identify that, and then in the next step, they would be simply using the numbers in their numerical equation alone, rather than using visual or physical manipulatives to have to identify the numbers.
Here in the abstract, as students work more with 10 frames, you can start to add additional 10 frames, and they'll represent the abstract problems. So here I have an example of 4 plus 9 is the same as 10 plus 3. So how we would have students interact, this is a virtual site called Toy Theater. You can have them use virtual manipulatives, or you can have them use actual physical counter manipulatives. So if I had 9 counters in here, right, and I had 9 that represented, and I wanted to do 9 plus 4, I can have them move that in there, and they can see that if they take one more up, they're filling up this 10 frame, and now I have 10 plus 3. You can also use multiple 10 frames to start to begin to introduce multiplication. If I have 3 in my first 10 frame, and I have 3 in my second 10 frame, so of those 2 10 frames, each of them have 3. 3 times 2, it'll give you that 6 answer. So they can begin to explore. So 10 frames, you can begin to go into higher math equations as the students get older. But if you start at that foundation in TK and Kinder with the 10 frames, they'll be more familiar and comfortable with using those 10 frames as they start to explore more complex math concepts.
So for our class activity, everyone will need a blank piece of paper and a pencil. You are going to draw out a 10 frame on your blank piece of paper. Once you have your 10 frame drawn out, you will need to draw 4 circles, 1 circle within each frame. Then you would draw 3 stars, each star within its own little square. Count how many shapes you have total, and write an addition number sentence to represent what you have done in your 10 frame.
All right, here we go. You have 2 minutes. Please grab a paper. You should be drawing out a 10 frame and writing the equation. So it'll be 4 circles and 3 stars. And then please write out the number sentence that represents. This is also the activity we would like you to screenshot and share in the blog.
All right, I hope you had enough time to go ahead and get that done. So your paper and your equation should look just like this. You have your 4 circles and your 3 stars, and then that would represent 4 plus 3. So we have you working in the semi-concrete phase when we have you draw out the 4 circles and the 3 stars. And then we have you transitioning and relating that to the abstract phase by simply writing the number sentence equation. So the 4 plus 3 equals 7. would represent that abstract phase. So you can see how these phases between the concrete, semi-concrete, and abstract will cross over many times. So I hope you had fun with this activity, and you guys probably did a fantastic job.
Well, we hope that you liked our presentation and that you got enough information about how to use 10 frame.